Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of Coffee with the Candidate. I am so excited to have with us this morning Megan Godfrey, who is a House of Representatives for District 89 here in our lovely state of Arkansas, representing constituents primarily in the Springdale area. This is Megan's second term that you're going.
First term.
First completed term, going for her second, and she has been just a dynamic powerhouse for her constituents in Little Rock and for us across the state. And I am just so delighted to have met Megan. She has been an extreme supporter, ally, motivator, encourager, mentor, ear. And not only does she help to encourage and inspire women in the political landscape, but also just people in general. She has taken on new and novel issues during her first term, particularly as it relates to DACA recipients in her district and getting the certifications for nursing. And I'll let you talk a little bit more about that, and just making tremendous differences in the lives of the people who live in her district. And so in these trying and uncertain times, I am ever more doubly grateful to have Megan here with us this morning to share with us some of the bird's eye view, fly on the wall perspective from inside the Arkansas legislature, what is happening with their deliberations, how they're hearing the news regarding coronavirus and COVID-19 and the spread across our community. And as many of you know, over the past week or so, Benton County and Washington County have experienced explosive increases in the number of positive cases that are being reported in this area. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those numbers, what we're seeing, why we think those numbers are occurring, and what we can do to help stop the spread, to continue to take care of ourselves, to continue to take care of our neighbors, and to be prepared for, if this is the second wave, what's coming here in Northwest Arkansas. So first of all, let me say, Megan, thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you so much for having coffee and sharing, a little bit about some of your experiences in the legislature. So if you would, can you just give the people that are tuned in today just an update on where we are with the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic across the state of Arkansas, and particularly how it's impacting Northwest Arkansas?
Sure. Well, Ronetta, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And, when you mentioned wanting to talk about COVID-19, that's about all I've been talking and thinking about lately. So I'm so grateful to share my perspective, my experience, not only as a legislator, but just as a neighbor, a Arkansan, a mom who's with her kids and trying to figure out the next best thing to do for my family, but also for our community at large. And so I'm so grateful to be here and to be able to share a little bit about my perspective and my work. Like you mentioned, we are seeing a somewhat alarming jump in the number of cases, not only as a state, but in particular in Washington and Benton County. My district is in Washington County. I know you're in Benton County, but North Arkansas as a whole is seeing a dramatic increase in the number of COVID cases. Mm-hmm. And so I think and for the solution, it's very complicated, it's very layered, multifaceted, but I kind of see it in two ways. One, of course, is the continued individual and personal responsibility that each of us can take to help reduce the spread, to take care of our own health, our family's health, but also the health and safety of our neighbors. We continue to hear about the importance of good social distancing practices, wearing a mask or a cloth face covering if you're going in public, reducing those trips out in public just for necessities, continuing to stay home, stay socially distant, limit those large family and friend gatherings, as difficult as it is in this, nice warm weather time.
Yeah.
Is a challenge. I've got a 7 and a 4-year-old at home, and they're screaming right now. We're getting cooped up and feeling sick.
Yes.
Yeah. So of course, I understand how difficult it is to continue making these adjustments that feel very limiting, very disruptive, and just unsustainable even sometimes. But I think because of this great number of increased cases, we have to continue to take it seriously as individuals. I also think, though, and this is a big part of my work, both as a legislator and also in my work as an educator, as well as just a concerned community member, we need to think big picture and systematically and structurally about things that we can do collectively to reduce the spread on a kind of widespread macro level. I think we need to consider what is the role of employers, what is the role of schools, what is the role of elected officials and the government and the health department, what is the role of community organizations, particularly vulnerable or underrepresented communities, and how can all stakeholders from those varying organizations not compete, but come together and collectively build structural and sustainable solutions in a time where we are seeing that some of our systems and structures are vulnerable and need to be edified in ways that consider all of the complexities of the communities that are affected. I think we're seeing, people of color are affected, young folks are affected, people who are working in particular industries are affected, and it takes all voices and all perspectives to come together and seek solutions that are multifaceted and complicated, but also can really come together and come from all of those voices giving input to find a common solution.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that as we're seeing the increase, the exponential increase in active cases here in Benton and Washington County, and how it directly coincides with the reopening of the economy, as it were, in restaurants and salons and gyms and all these other facilities that have been closed for about 2 months. And as you and I were talking earlier, here in Northwest Arkansas, we probably experienced a little bit of an insulated bubble. We didn't have the numbers that we have seen in some other states, neighboring states like Texas or other areas, New York, of course. And I think that kind of, even though we weren't under a formal governor ordered, mandated stay-at-home type order, we took it upon ourselves, and a lot of employers did as well, to exercise discretion as it relates to the health and safety of their employees and of our own persons. And I think that did a tremendous justice to us being able to kind of mute the spread of the coronavirus here in Northwest Arkansas. But as the economy is reopening, as people are getting out more into the mainstream, now the numbers are going up. So whereas we had felt confident before because our efforts from social distancing and wearing the masks and hand washing and all those other efforts from hygiene to sanitation were working, we felt comfortable, but it didn't stop the spread. Coronavirus didn't call up and say, okay, I'm done, and you guys can go about. We have this arbitrary date, we're out and about, and now the numbers are going up. So I wonder, are we sending mixed messages to the people that, to our family and friends? One, where we're saying it's opening up, it kind of sends the message that things are safe. Go back out, carry on life. But at the same time, wear your masks, stay socially distant, continue washing your hands. Are those like dual messages that we're getting from our leadership?
Well, I think the only way we can have success is if those messages are not competing, but are in fact compatible. that we say, we understand we need to open up our businesses. We understand that people are hurting economically and need opportunities to go back to work. And I agree. And I've heard stories from constituents who are desperate to get back to work because they need to put food on the table. And I understand how vital it is for people to work and earn a living. But at the same time, if that's the case, if we are going to open, then we must be vigilant about those paired practices that need to accompany reopening, which are, like you mentioned, the hand washing, the social distancing, the continuing to take it very seriously, if not more seriously, in public as things open, because we are seeing, more and more people interacting, more people in public, more people with the opportunity to transmit the virus. And so what I'm afraid is what happened is that they heard we're open, that means it's over, it's safe.
Right. It does.
Which instead, we needed a very clear, strong message with directives with teeth behind that message to say, yes, we must open because we care about people's livelihoods. We care about the opportunity for moms and dads to work, to provide for their kids. Mm-hmm. But also because of that, because we take that responsibility seriously to reopen our economy, we have to do it in ways that are very thoughtful and are very focused on prioritizing public health over let's just do whatever and see what happens and cross our fingers. And I'm afraid that because people have not paired the reopening with a dedication to public health practices, we are seeing this resurgence of cases.
And I think part of the challenge is the onus or the burden of these public health, enforcing and establishing the public health guidelines fall to individuals. They fall to individual businesses. They fall to individual, organizations. They fall to individual families, rather, to enforce those. So, whereas before, everything was shut down, people knew they needed to stay in, they needed to practice all of these safety precautions. And now everything, as businesses reopen and people start re-engaging with each other, it's even more important to be vigilant because, but then, it's kind of a confusing time. People are like, I really don't know if I can or should go out.
That's right. And what you say about individual responsibility, I think there have been really amazing and creative and innovative things done by businesses to take it seriously, to say, you know what, we're going to close our dining room, we're going to stay closed even though we're allowed to be open, and we're going to offer delivery even though we never had before. Or yes, our salon is open, but we're going to do spread out appointments, and we're going to make sure that everybody has a mask on, and we're not gonna open too soon without too many precautions. And I've really been impressed by a lot of business owners and a lot of individuals who are saying, even though I'm allowed to open or I'm allowed to, to get back to work, I still really care about the health and safety of my employees and the sustainability of my business, and I appreciate that. But I agree that there is also, because there are people who don't take seriously the guidance or the directives, or don't agree with the approach, or don't believe in the science, that we're seeing some just kind of attitudes of, I'm going to do what I want, and it's my choice, it's my freedom, instead of thinking collectively and thinking as a community and thinking about what is best for us as a whole and what is best for my neighbor, and making choices for my neighbor, my vulnerable neighbor, instead of just for myself. Mm-hmm. And so I do worry about that.
Yeah, it's a hard message. We're in uncharted territory. Okay. And I understand, like you said, and wholeheartedly support businesses being able to be viable and functional. My husband and I are both small business owners. He actually had to close his business because of this, so I understand the financial impact that this pandemic has caused. And I do think that the public health issues are should take precedence over productivity and profits, to be honest. Um, because if you don't have healthy people, you don't have an economy, right? You don't have profits, you don't have productivity. And
That's exactly right. And I think they go hand in hand.
they do go hand in hand.
I think there's a, after you.
No, and if there are people who are able to, and let's be clear too, um, there are some folks who, because of the unemployment benefits and the extra $600 a week from the federal programs, are better able to take care of their families now because they're making more in unemployment than they were when they were working and contributing to, um, that it benefits them to stay home right now, to take care of their families, to take care of themselves, to take care of others, and not put them and not risk their their lives, let alone their livelihood.
I think that's right. I think not only the economic and financial considerations, but many folks are vulnerable themselves, are in that high risk population, or are caring for someone who is.
Mm-hmm.
And to have to decide between I have to go to work or I have to, take care of my health or the health of those I care for is a very challenging and life or death decision, honestly, to not overstate it.
Yeah, it's challenging too, because as we were talking before, here in Benton and Washington County, we have a higher positivity rate for the testing than average. Do we know why that is? What's happening in Benton and Washington counties that's leading us to have so many more positive cases than the average?
Well, I think the number of tests is increasing, and I think that is worth mentioning, that as we test more, we will see more positives. But you're right that the percentage of positives is high, and is notably high, and is worth taking seriously. I don't think we can just say, oh, more people are getting tested, and that's why the cases are going up. Regardless of why, we are having cases go up, and we are seeing that the virus is present. And so I think it's absolutely important that we, regardless of which communities are hit harder, or which individuals are having access to testing or seeing positives in those communities, that we all need to continue to treat it as a community and a collective, not just an isolated problem.
No, it's not isolated, especially when you think of the rate of positivity amongst communities of color, particularly the Latinx community here in Benton County. I think you gave me the numbers. They represent 85% of the new cases in Benton County and 40% of the new cases in Washington County.
That's right. Yeah, and that's particularly relevant in my district, but definitely in Northwest Arkansas as a whole. And I think, again, it's so important that we, even if we individually or particularly don't fall into one of these communities or one of these groups that is seeing an increased number of cases, that we continue to treat the increased number of cases and the virus itself as something that is a collective issue and a collective problem, and that we need to solve collectively, and just in the communities that are seeing higher instances.
Yeah, and I think the point that you make is really critical, because this is personal too. And even if you're not in the Latinx community, or I'm not in the Latinx community, that doesn't mean that I'm in the clear. No, we are all still highly susceptible to this virus. It is not a respecter of persons or ethnic backgrounds, but I think it does reflect or show some disparities in some of the systems that we've been talking about previously.
I think that's right. And that's something that I've been advocating, really from day one, is the importance of communication targeted to communities who are vulnerable, especially non-English speaking communities. I'm proud that, my own team has done a lot of communications in Spanish and Marshallese, but I know that the health department has made some significant strides in making sure that communities who are English speaking are also in the loop. But I know that, having worked with English language learners my entire career, both previously as an educator and then currently in my role as a representative, there is a lag between how quickly something can get translated and communicated and dispersed within a non-English speaking community, and how the same message is immediately received in an English speaking community. There's just a delay. And so in my conversations with community leaders in Marshallese community and the Latinx community, they understand that reality very well, that even though folks are scrambling to get out vital information for these communities, that there is a time delay, there is a lag. There's not immediacy from the moment the news breaks to the moment communities can access the information, and therefore our non-native English speaking communities can be more vulnerable just because of that lack of information, the lack of
So what can we do now? So one of the things I think is most critical is, as this public health crisis is shining a light on the disparities in so many of our social systems, it's incumbent upon us to take note, and not only take note, but take action. So if we know, for example, that there are disparities in access to health, we know that there are disparities in the dissemination and communication of public health information, we know that there are challenges and disparities in our housing system and the economic job opportunities, and the list just goes on and on. I know we can't solve all the problems immediately, but we can start putting some corrective measures in place now to address what we know are disparities, so that we don't continue to compound the problems going forward. You can think of lots of remedies for the communication gap, as we put it, and address that immediately.
And I would say you're exactly right in thinking about, the big picture and the structural problems can feel overwhelming, can feel like, oh, there is so much work to do, and where do we even begin? I've had very similar feelings, today and really all week, in seeing just how much work there is still to do. But at the same time, there are so many partners who are doing that work in so many different areas, doing that work for food insecurity, for housing, for communications, for health disparities. There are so many amazing organizations in the public and private and nonprofit sector who are doing that work. And so I would say a good first step is to just get plugged in and get connected with organizations who share your values, who share those same goals of championing equity and compassion and advocacy for all, particularly underrepresented communities and individuals. And just, first of all, be a learn about the work that's already happening, so that when you do plug in, you can see where your strengths and your voice are most needed, are most, are best leveraged. I know, since we're all staying home, a great way to do that is just to follow organizations on social media. People have been really great during this time to provide a lot of very helpful and informative advocacy-driven content with ways to be a part of this work, whether that, like I said, is through the nonprofit sector, or through a faith-based partnership, or through business community, through elected officials. I think that some of the best solutions and some of the best really collective advocacy has come from groups, and there are meetings these days, but groups that have come together from all of those different areas, all those different sectors, and they say we have such different areas of expertise, but a common goal, and that is public health, that is advocacy, that is equality for all of our communities in our area. And so I think just plugging in to groups that are already doing that work is a great way just to be a part of that collective advocacy.
And I think that's tremendous too. And there are lots and lots of opportunities for people to get engaged in community work and advocate for their particular issues. I would say that ultimately the goal of the advocacy is to make change, to effect change. And to do so, they have to have the ear, the influence of those who are responsible or who hold that ability to make the change, whether it be, making changes in the court system, making changes in the legislative branch. And I think as a current legislator, as a potential legislator, there are additional responsibilities to advocate for our constituents who are underrepresented. There are additional obligations to make sure that those uncomfortable conversations are held for the protection of our neighbors. And the individuals who are advocating through community organizations, through their employers, through different avenues, ultimately are trying to effectuate change. And I think it's incumbent to make sure that we're listening to the changes that need to be made, and we're hearing it, and we're doing something about it. Even if we're not successful all the time, that we are advocating for them. And I know that you sent out constituent surveys recently, and I saw that you got tremendous feedback. What were some of the things that people were saying to you that were of concern?
Sure. So even before that, I'll just say that as a legislator, hearing from constituents, even when it's tough, even when constituents don't always agree with me, is so helpful. It helps me do my job better. It broadens my horizons, and it helps me know which both general and specific things to advocate for. So something, yes, I did recently was I sent a paper, an in the mail survey to my constituents with just kind of a letter from me checking in, saying, thinking about you. I know this is hard. And then several different kind of suggestions or ideas or proposals that I wondered and wanted feedback on to see if they would be helpful for constituents. Things I had been kind of hearing trickling in from folks who emailed or heard from other colleagues, but just kind of compiled those together. And it was really very eye-opening because I could tell, I have a pretty politically diverse district. People from all, political stripes live in my district, but there were some common trends and common themes of what people needed. I think, first of all, I saw that people really are struggling. People are hurting. This is a difficult time, and they need help and they need support. And so in some ways, I was so glad to be able to hear that. I was able to, to meet specific constituent needs, people who needed help with SNAP benefits they had lost, people who needed help, they hadn't received their stimulus check, people who needed, a letter asking for, help with their landlord, concrete things that I was able to do that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. And I think, another big trend that I saw, not only that things are really difficult, but also that people, regardless of age, regardless of politics, really still want their neighbors to show that commitment to social distancing and mask wearing. That was one of the most frequently checked boxes that I need people around me to be healthy and safe and courteous and thoughtful by, making those moves in public to wear a mask and socially distance. There were some other specific ones as well. Lots of considerations for essential workers, for teachers, for folks who are, having trouble with unemployment. A lot of those ideas really resonated. Another very detractors as well was a way to vote safely from home. Expanding absentee ballots, that was one that got lots of stars, lots of underlines, please, people begging for that. Although to be fair, there were a couple who said absolutely not, just with some concerns about voter fraud, which, is something that we can definitely address and look into, because I think the fears can be minimized just with a good, secure absentee voting system in place, that is in place in other states. Something that I thought was worth mentioning. That
no, and I think those are excellent things. I think, of course, they are, because they're the actual concerns from the constituents in your district. And I think as we talk about how we can address those specific concerns and knowing exactly where their hearts and minds are, it's really important to have their actual words. And so even if, the economy is reopening and stores and salons and all these services, if people are still personally concerned about their safety and express a desire still, until we know more, until we have more information or can feel that we're in the clear, please keep your distance, please wear your masks, please continue, good hygiene. And, the election you talked about, the absentee and mail-in, the election is less than 6 months away. And we still don't have any sense that by November that all of this will be 100% behind us. And if those concerns are still there, how are we managing to exercise our constitutional rights to vote in a way that's safe and healthy, and we don't feel we're putting our lives or our families' lives at risk by participating in this constitutional activity?
Sure. And I do feel encouraged, because I know that both the governor and several of my Republican colleagues have expressed interest and support for expanding absentee ballots. Right now in Arkansas, you have to have a reason to request an absentee ballot, an approved reason. And so the change that I would like to see happen as a first step would just be to say, you don't have to have a reason. An absentee ballot is enough of a reason to request one. There are several states who have no reason absentee voting and don't have issues with fraud. And that is a change that the governor has expressed support for in the past, that Republican legislators had, drafted a bill and had considered introducing it during a budget session. And it lost a little bit of steam. And so I'm hoping that there can be a renewed bipartisan commitment to ensuring that all of our citizens can vote. I had 84-year-old Army vets and single moms and, first-time voters all saying, yes, vote by mail through expanded absentee ballots would be very helpful for me at this time. I've also heard from constituents who are worried about poll workers who tend to be elderly and they're at risk, who do a great public service for us by working at the polls, but also often are retired and are at an age that puts them at risk for COVID. And so I think that, rethinking.
What would that process look like? Would the governor have to call a special session? Can he sign something between now and October? What can anyone who's watching do to help facilitate that process?
Sure. Either of those options are possible. We could have a special legislative session for the purpose of passing legislation banning absentee voting, or the governor could issue an executive order. He did for the special elections that were happening at the end of March. He issued an executive order just for this exact reason and saw the need for it then. And so I know his concerns are around if the public health crisis is still happening, then we can consider it then. But I think that for many people, again, according to my surveys and according to folks who are vulnerable and folks who are seeing numbers rise in their communities and in their families, I think taking health precautions seriously, to me, is enough of a reason to be able to vote safely from your home through the absentee ballot system that already works and is already secure, and we've already said is a valid and safe and secure way to vote for those who qualify. And so I just think we should allow more individuals to qualify for the safe and secure voting process that already exists.
So how can folks who are watching or their family and friends who they may share this information with, how can we help to kind of motivate that result to happen? What can we do? Do we need to call people? Do we need to email, write letters? What do we need to do?
I think reaching out to your legislator is always a great thing to do. I would say that, the framing of the issue really is around your right to vote, as well as public health concerns, not only for voters, but also for poll workers. I think that framing is compelling and is hard to argue against. And, I think there's kind of a politicization of vote by mail, this idea of vote by mail. But really what I think we in Arkansas can and should do is just make that small step toward, now you have to have a reason to vote absentee. Now the change should be just to,
No excuse.
like to request an absentee ballot, can. Everything else in the process is the same. We're not restructuring the entire election system to where everybody has a ballot via mail. I think, really considering the time, considering the political climate, that the best, and support, again, previous support for this exact goal from the Republican governor, from Republican legislators, to say, let's just make that small change from reason absentee to no reason absentee. And contacting the governor's office as well as expressing your support, because you're right, either his executive order could do it or a special session could do it. And I hope that either way, we see that as an option, because my constituents are begging for it. And I know I'm not the only legislator who has constituents who really want to be able to feel safe to vote and to exercise their right in an important election.
And I think in addressing, the argument or the issue or concern regarding fraud, you've stated that the process is already in existence. It's already proven safe. It's already proven reliable. I don't think there's anything that's 100% fraud free. So I don't think that should be the standard that we look to in order when we're having the discussion about the mail-in ballots or the absentee ballots. But Arkansas already has a system. The governor has already mandated it at the end of March for the special election, for the runoffs. So I think, like you said, if we didn't, that would be a different conversation. We would be trying to figure out how to develop this system that would work. But we have a system that's proven safe and effective and with integrity, and just allowing more people to take advantage of that system that already exists, while it also protects their health and safety and the health and safety of the poll workers, and would conceivably give more people an opportunity to participate in the process as well. Yeah. So while we're thinking about participating in the process and the absentee ballot and lots of other things, we also had a quick conversation about some of the this deep in my heart, particularly the violence, the protests and the reason for the protests that are going on across the country, in Minneapolis, in Kentucky, in Georgia, incident after incident relative to racial injustice, profiling, and just the civic and social unrest. We're not experiencing that so much here, specifically in Northwest Arkansas, but it doesn't mean we're not touched by it. What can the legislature do to get ahead, to get ahead of something like this happening? What kind of provisions, protections can be put into place that you can advocate for, that all of us can advocate for, to protect our brothers and sisters?
I appreciate the question. And it's something that I think about a lot, both in my own role as a leader, but also just a neighbor in a diverse community, and also as a legislator. And I think that the first step, before we consider specific policy, is definitely to take on a posture of humiliation, of humility, a posture of humility, for those of us who do not share the lived experiences of those who are experiencing this pain. So one thing that I've been encouraged by over the past several days is seeing the desire for increased empathy and understanding by folks who are white, who do not understand or live the experience of people of color. And I think that in some ways that's been an encouragement to me. I also know that there is a lot of work to do. And that those of us in positions of influence and leadership need to do that work intentionally, and to seek out opportunities to not just be not racist, but to be actively anti-racist. Mm-hmm. And that is vulnerable and challenging work. And it comes with, it can come with a lot of discomfort. But at the same time, I think for those of us who choose to be leaders, for those of us who choose to be elected by individuals who have very diverse stories and experiences, it is on us to learn what those stories are, to learn what those experiences are, and to accept those as the truth of those individuals who are sharing them with us. And so I think first, before good policy is created or advocated for, we need a commitment to the values of equity and advocacy and compassion, and an understanding that the lived experience of all Arkansans is not the same.
Yeah.
So that is work that I try to do, work that I want to continue to do, but also can constantly grow in doing. And that is the work that every legislator, every leader, every public servant, every leader in any sector needs to do, to, like I said, put on, just be humble, be willing to learn, be willing to listen, and also, put ourselves under the mentorship of people of color in a way that elevates their experience, so that we can better lead and so that we can better represent. I talk a lot about wanting to elevate the voices of my district, not be the voice of my district, because everybody has a voice and a story. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing now is a lot of stories of pain and fear. Mm-hmm. As leaders, we minimize or discredit the pain and fear. We're not doing our job.
Yes.
And so I think first is just a commitment to the attitude of compassion and humility as leaders, particularly white leaders.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would agree with you that there is a step, there is a process, and we all have to come to the table understanding and accepting the fact that there are challenges, there are problems, and we won't get there if there is a denial or if people are feeling guilty or accusatory. We are in trying times, and we are past the point of let's just talk about it, and there's a lot that's required to be done, quite frankly, and we've got to step up and to do that work. We cannot wait until it hits our backyard to begin the work. And I know that there are lots of different initiatives going on, but just across the diversity and inclusion landscape across Northwest Arkansas and across the state, that if we learn nothing through these crises that we see playing out in other cities and other states across this country, we need to elevate those efforts. We need to accelerate those efforts, and we need to make sure that they're that the value and dignity of every life, particularly those people of color, are respected. And if we have to legislate it to do it, then we need to legislate it to do it. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't address, in addition to the public health crisis that's that we're facing, that we also address this crisis as well. So I appreciate your input on that, Megan, and thank you for your commitment and the work that you do to elevate the voices and the stories of the people within your district and across the state.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's an honor and a responsibility, and something I want to continue to take seriously and do with excellence. And that comes from, folks who lead me well as well. And I'm so grateful to those who have mentored me and continue to be those I can learn from and partner with. As far as specifics, though, I do think it's worth mentioning that recently, even within this past legislative term, the governor has expressed support for a hate crimes law, anti-hate crimes law. We don't have one in the state of Arkansas, which is a glaring problem. And I think we're seeing, with many of the problems, heightened tensions, that it is worth revisiting his commitment to having an anti-hate crimes law in Arkansas. I have heard him mention it recently, but I know that he has expressed support for it in the recent past, even potentially calling a special session for it. And so I think it's worth revisiting that idea, that proposal, because Arkansas is behind not having a hate crimes law on the books. So I think that you're exactly right, that advocacy should lead to action, and that is a concrete step we can and should take.
So I want to encourage everyone who's participating and watching and listening, whether the original broadcast or it's been shared with you, if you're interested in getting involved in any of this work, you're interested in advocating on a lot of the issues that we talked about, drop your name and email address in the comment section. Let's get connected. And if it's not through this campaign, then there are lots of organizations that, as Megan mentioned, are advocating on behalf of those within the community. Find a spot to plug in and to get engaged, because it's on all of us. It's on all of us, elected or not, to advocate for change, to look out for our brothers and sisters across the district, across the state, across the country. We can't wait for anyone else to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And we can't look around and say, who's going to do it? We have to do it. Megan has to do it. I have to do it. And you have to do it. So I encourage each of you to get engaged and get involved. Megan, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your expertise, your experiences, your philosophies, your values, your passion as it relates to being an elected official, being a mom, being a citizen, just being a human. And I thank you for all the work that you're doing on behalf of us down in Little Rock. And I wish you continued success, and that, and then maybe, hope to see you down in Little Rock in January, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Ronetta, and keep up the great work. And thanks for the invitation to visit with you today.
Thank you so much. And to all of you out there, please remember, get connected, get plugged in, but stay safe. Wash your hands, sanitize, wear your masks, social distance. Even more critical now than ever. Stay safe, be well.